is rise, we can delay it. Someone had to say it.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome to another episode of the Someone Had to Say It podcast. So, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. And you?
I'm awesome. So let's do a quick introduction. My name is Temitope Oladokun, and
I am Olaoluwa and Temitope.
You can call me Tokpadokes.
And you can call me LA.
Alrighty. I'm super excited about this episode.
Tell me why you're excited.
I'm just excited to be talking with you.
Oh, thank you. So I guess you're excited every episode.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I am excited to be doing this with you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive right into the red shoebox.
Yeah, so in case you are just joining us on this episode, the red shoebox is basically where we have questions, suggestions, thoughts regarding what we can talk about on the episode. So let me use this opportunity to remind you that you can reach out to us via DMs on Instagram, via our email, someone had to say it official@gmail.com, or even in the comments. People have been suggesting topics and different things that we can talk about. We drop them in here and
we jiggle.
Yes, jiggle. And select what we'll be talking about for today. Just add some magic to it.
Okay.
All right. So for today, we are going to be talking about. Okay, the day has finally come for this one. This is going to be the pornography episode.
Wow.
Wonderful. So it seems.
Are you ready for this?
Well, someone has to say
it's about time.
It's about time.
Okay.
Let's go.
So I'll start with this. How much of a problem or a menace is pornography today? I know people talk about pornography, how terrible it is, how it has wrecked people's lives, literally. How bad is the virality of it?
It's interesting because we are talking about, even though it has generally, a lot of people will tell you it has negative influence generally. You're talking about one of the greatest industries that we have in the world right now. The pornography industry is estimated to be worth about $90 billion. In fact, over $90 billion. That's worth more than the NBA. That's worth more than the NFL. That's worth more than Hollywood in terms of projected estimation. So we are talking about something huge. If you look at the data regarding how many people are visiting pornographic websites daily, it's in millions. So this is something huge. In fact, I often wonder what is going to happen on the day that internet service providers decide to release the data of people's incognito search history. What people search. And it's so big a deal that on that day, it's going to be the closest thing to Armageddon. I don't think anybody wants to know what's going to happen, because you would be shocked and surprised at the kind of people that watch pornography, the number of, the kinds of genre of pornography that people watch. It's a widespread pandemic. It's a huge problem that somebody needs to talk about, and we need to actually look for practical ways to solve, because trust me, it's closer to all of us than we think. So that's what I think about it.
Thank you so much for the statistics that you mentioned, because I feel like a lot of times when people talk about it, it's from an emotional sensationalism, perspective, and I think it's good that we put numbers to it so that we understand how widespread and pervasive it has become. Yeah, I think it's so powerful, and you mentioned something about the genre, and it's so intense that I think on some layers it reveals what a lot of us have suppressed, right? So you see people who are married, for instance, attracted to gay pornography, right? Or transgender pornography, and it's crazy, and it just speaks to some of the longings and the desires that people have that they are unable to talk about, some of the repressed feelings that they are unable to address, and it just shows in this area, or maybe about violence-related pornography, and it's so intense.
Yeah.
I think my next question would be, what was the first time that you had exposure to porn, and how did it impact you?
Wow, that's a memory lane question. First of all, I should mention that maybe this episode may just be rated 18 because so in case you are listening to it around
I think we need to put
children,
that,
exactly. So this
at
is
the
not the one you want to listen
beginning.
to on the drive with the kids in the car. So because I mean, as much as possible, I would want to be as detailed as possible. Even though I would not want to mention some specifics, so I don't give, there's a way you can, in your bid to explain something, you are giving people things to go and research about, which could lead them, lead them down a hole. And before I answer that question, I also remember how regarding the statistics and the impact of pornography, even though it's a sad statistics, sad set of data, it has also given, more recently, a number of ladies have sort of gained financial independence through uploading their private contents to a certain website, which I will not mention, so that somebody does not go and search for it. So, I mean, it's huge. So while it's creating financial liberation, the opportunity cost is very, very dire. And we'll get into all of that. So about my exposure to pornography, I think the very first time that I can remember encountering something pornographic must have been, now I don't have the details clearly, I can't recollect clearly, but I remember visiting a neighbor's house. I just walked into the living room, and I mean, a number of my friend, his siblings, and all of them were watching this pornographic video. I remember that's the first recollection I have. I must have been maybe 8 or 9 years old at the time. I was just in shock because the things I was seeing, So they
didn't show you away, they literally left
No, I mean, my friend too was there. So, I mean, the things I was seeing were things I'd never seen in my life before up until that point. So, it was shock. I was more afraid than I was enticed. So, I remember staying there for some minutes. I was just there. I think they later changed it to watch a regular movie. Even while we were watching the movie, I could not get, those pictures off my head. That's the first scenario that I remember. And another incident I remember was, I think in GSS 1, I must have been 9 years old at this point. I think I got into secondary school quite early for that time. And I remember on my way back home with some of my classmates, we were going back home. So we stopped at a video center. I think that's what they used to call it, where they sell VCDs and cassettes and all of that. I think we wanted to buy, I can't remember, maybe it was wrestling or something. And I remember seeing all these pornographic movies, and they used to display those things in public. I was seeing sizes of genitals that my mind could not comprehend. I was wondering, what are people doing with these things? Like, how can something be this big, if you know what I mean? So it was really, really shocking to me. And the fact that it was there in public. And in that moment, my lack of exposure was sort of being, what's the word? I was made to feel bad about the fact that I didn't know about it, because while me and my classmates were there, all of them were just talking about all the videos. One was talking about, he has watched this one, mentioning different titles and all of that, and I couldn't feel among. So I was just nodding my head. Exactly. I mean, I'm telling you, I was 9 or 10 years old at this point. So at that time, this was already something that was all over the place, And after that period, I remember when I got much older, must have been in senior secondary school at this point, when I got a phone that could actually browse out of curiosity. And I must tell you that at this point for me, it was just about keeping up with the conversations that were happening around me. I would hear my classmates talking about their different sexual escapades, how many girls they slept with, how many pornographic videos they've seen, talking about sexual encounters. And I did not have any understanding of I could not even contribute to the joke. So it was more like a FOMO thing at that point in time. So I remember I would just go online, start searching for different things. And at that point, I did not even know what masturbation was. So that was where my conscious exposure to pornography started. So I just go online. My phone was not smart enough to search for videos, but at least I could search for pictures. So I'll just search for pictures online. And all of that was just filtering information into my head. Of course, there definitely were movies. At that point, there were some movies. So many of these things I will not, even though I feel I should be mentioning, but the only reason why I will not say the names is so that it doesn't send somebody down the wrong pigeon. There were some movies that were coming out at that point in time, and people who can relate to this era will probably already have some ideas of what I'm talking
2010
about. Yeah.
ish
So
era.
no, this for me, this was between maybe 2007, 2008 period
Yeah.
for me around that time. So there's some movies that were trending around
Yeah.
that period on
Hollywood.
VCDs,
Yeah.
Hollywood movies. You know, then you buy DVDs that had like 20 in one, all those things. So I would go and buy those movies. I didn't want anybody in the house to see them. Sorry, mommy and daddy. Sorry, everybody. This is now you're entering into my chamber of secrets. So I would scratch the disc would have the picture on there, so I would scratch it off so that you wouldn't be able to tell what was on it. I would keep it inside my PlayStation so that nobody would go and find. I mean, I was the only one who was going around there. Whether or not anybody found it, I do not know. Of course, so I mean, by that time, I wasn't buying like hardcore pornographic movies, but it was movies that had sexually explicit scenes. At least that was the farthest my mind could handle at that point in time. So I would watch those, go online, check pictures. I would try to play videos, but my phone could not handle videos at that point in time. But of course, as technology evolved, more bandwidth, more RAM capacity, all of that. So I transitioned from pictures to videos. Even at this point, I still was only just watching. I had never encountered masturbation. So all of that, secondary school, got into the university, and by this time, I was on fire for God, serving God, enjoying my life, and I wouldn't even call it an addiction at this point in time. It was just, I don't even know how to describe it, because I mean, even now I'm thinking that what was I even enjoying? Just flipping through pictures and not even doing anything about it, but of course, and even at that point in time, I found the movies much more enticing than even the pictures, because the movies that there was a plot, there was a character, and he was already educating me about sex, about what to expect, what to anticipate. There were so many things I saw in those movies at that time that I did not understand. That it was later on when I grew older that maybe sometimes that those movies will now flash back to my head. I would just now get the joke that I missed when I was, that was when I was 14, 15, 16 and all of that. So until there was this fateful strike that happened when I was in uni. So I'm intentionally going into this story to sort of
Nigerian uni, you do this one.
Exactly. It was actually a cause problem for my life. So basically there was this fateful strike. I knew it was very long. This must have been around maybe the 2012 Olympics. Because I remember this vividly, because I know how I spiraled into masturbation. So we were on break. There wasn't anything to do. So we were just at home doing nothing. And I was just looking at pictures and videos the way I usually do. But when there's idleness, there's that curiosity for more. And again, remember, I had always, maybe classmates, whoever, people around me, people would talk about sex, talk about escapades, talk about orgasms. I never knew. I just used to nod and act like I knew what was going on, but I didn't really understand the concept of these things. So there was this book. Again, I will not mention the book, but if you can connect the dots, you know what I'm talking about. It was popular around that period. If you remember, I already gave away the Olympic Games specifically that was happening. So there was one book that was trending at that particular time. So out
Maybe
of boredom,
tell me the book later.
Okay, maybe. So out of boredom, I was like, okay, let me go and. It was an erotic book.
Okay.
It's very popular. I'm sure it's probably the first thing that will come to most people's mind. So out of boredom, I was like, okay, let me read this book. So I went and searched
that
for
they
it.
made it into a movie.
You are the one saying that. Don't give too many clues. It's okay.
Scratch that. Okay.
Exactly. So I went and started reading the book. And you know how books are very, very poetic, describes the scene and all of that. But for me, I don't know if this is a guy thing. You can let me know. I found the build-up so boring and annoying. Like, let me just digress and say this. People that enjoy reading romance fiction, how do you cope? Go straight to the point. And he will be first telling me, and he came down the stairs. The breeze was blowing in his face. I said, why are you describing? Okay, what's happened next? So I just found. So I was reading the book, got into the descriptions about how they had sex and all of that. It was interesting, but the build up was just too slow for me. Like, why is it taking this long for you to take off your clothes? Like, why? You first tell me you wanted to take off the button. If the button was made of calories, please. So I just dropped it, and then I was like, okay, maybe it's time for me to explore this aspect of this thing that I've gotten into that I haven't. And I remember it was a struggle for me. Maybe because a part of me knew that, see, I was venturing into this territory I was about to step into. That's regarding masturbation. Yeah. This territory I was about to step into. There's no going back from here. And I remember that day, eventually, after doing it, I felt something I never felt in my life. And I knew that day that I was in trouble. I just knew that new problem unlocked. I just knew it that, hey, God. So the first thing I was thinking about, remember, we were on strike. I was fervent in church. I was devoted. I was serving God with all my heart and all of that. And I knew that I had unlocked a new dimension of trouble. And that started a 7-year journey for me which eventually led to an addiction and a dependency. It got so bad for me. Of course, it wasn't immediate. You know, there will be relapses. You deal with the guilt. You beg God. You say, you're sorry, you not do it again. Eventually, you fall back to it. Exactly. So there were several waves, several cycles of it. You deal with the guilt. There were sometimes I'll be like, see, well, God is not doing anything against me. You know, there were times I'll look for justifications on how there's nothing wrong with it. So throughout that period, I went through different cycles, times where I'll feel condemned, I'll feel bad. Sometimes I felt like quitting church. The responsibility was too much. Sometimes I will accept that, okay, there's grace for me. How exactly does this grace work? Does this license me to continue like this? You know, so it was just it was a very, very funny dynamics. And that's why I feel like these situations, these things are much more difficult for Christians to deal with than people who don't have these values, who don't believe in God, who don't have, you know, any sense of guilt or condemnation or all those things. So even though it seemed it was necessary for me to reinforce myself with there's therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. But then eventually I had to realize that, was this exactly how I wanted to be using the mercy of God in my life? So, I mean, I just went down that spiral. It got to a point where I actually could not sleep without without porn. That was the only way I could get myself to sleep. Like, there were times, and at this point I knew that, okay, this is a full-blown addiction. There were times where, without any need, without any trigger, it's not even like I saw something. It was just the only way I knew how to go to bed at night. So, speaking about this is somebody who has actually been through it. And I can confidently say, and I thank God for my journey and how He was able to deliver me completely from it. So if you are currently struggling with pornography and masturbation, you are or listening to somebody who has gone through it and can confidently tell you that, yes, there's liberation for you, and you'll hear a lot more about that. So in long summary, that was basically a summarized version of, you know, my exposure to pornography and masturbation.
What was there for me to say? Okay, so I will just breeze through what my first exposure to porn was. I think it must have been from an older person's phone. You know how as kids, I think maybe I was 8 or something, but pretty young, and you just pick up an adult phone, and then of course we didn't have phones. So once you pick up an adult phone, you start to go through the gallery because you're just bored. I think an older, you know how we call family friends like uncles. One person's older than you, and it's like a family friend. You know, we just call them uncles. So I would say an older uncle, and I was scared. Like, okay, what's happening? First, I saw.
I'm sure they can already tell that we are many on this episode. All right, you can continue.
So I think I initially saw pictures, explicit pictures. I'm like, okay, what's happening? And then I saw the video, these short clip videos, like 1 minute, 2 minutes. Maybe I watched it to the end. I think I must have, out of curiosity. I'm like, oh wow, what's happening? I know these strange storylines with mom and daughter, and I'm like, okay, it was so confusing at the time. And I'm sure I must have seen a couple of clips as well in secondary school. Maybe friends would, because I was in a boarding school, friends would bring phones to class, and they would just pass the phones around. Of course, you don't want to seem like the
exactly the odd one
stuck up person, and we'll just see and giggle and laugh, and all of that. And I think there was an encounter that struck my mind. It didn't happen, but I think God delivered me. So remember I said I was in boarding school. I wasn't feeling well. So my mom had come to pick me from school. And because she had to go to work, she had brought me to a friend's place. So I was like with a family friend with like the kids and all of that. And in the evening when they had come back from school, I overheard them. And because it was a compound of like many kids and like, you know, teenagers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're all kids then. I was maybe like 12, 13. And I overheard them saying that they wanted to do a blue film watch party. No, watch party is fancy.
Yeah.
Basically, they'll be
come
like
together.
7 people, 8 people come to the house and they are playing pornography. Pornographic like movies. And in my head, I'm like, I was sweating all over and panicking. And in my mind, I'm thinking, what happens? First of all, it was clear that this is something they had done in the past.
Yeah.
Number 2, what usually happens after this kind of watch sessions? You get like, imagine teenagers with raging hormones all watching pornography. Yeah. What if somebody comes in and, you know, they catch all of us? I'm not part of them. Yeah. I just got here. And for some reason in my mind, I was just praying, oh my God, please just help. Let this thing not happen. Let an adult come. Because I wasn't feeling well. I was really wanting, okay, if 8, 9, 10 teenagers want to watch, I'm even a visitor there. Who am I? You get? And thank God for some reason, it did not happen. And I'm just thinking, and I think for me, looking back now as an adult, and I realized that sometimes we think that young people, and when I say young people, I'm talking about young adults, I'm talking about 20s, we feel like teenagers, even preteens, have not had their first exposure to explicit content, to porn. Yeah. And I think we just need to shun that level of ignorance, of oblivion, because we need to remember that some of us were exposed to it as preteens, you know, and we shouldn't shy away from talking to young kids about certain things and having those tough conversations around sex. Because for a lot of people, that was the first exposure to sex, the first narrative to sex, the first ideology, you know, for sex. I mean, there's a movie that is making waves right now, right, called Adolescence. And it's so powerful. A lot of men, a lot of ladies even grew up thinking that sex has to be aggressive, right? Yeah. And we were not designed to exist in a hyper-stimulated environment. Nobody was designed to be that way. But when that's your first exposure, even when you now have your first encounter, it's such a letdown because it's not living up to what you've said. Yeah. I think that being said, my next question would be, how does porn impact people's expectations around sex, love, and intimacy?
That's a very, very interesting question because pornography happens to be the biggest educator regarding sex right now. It is the primary tool through which almost, you know, everybody, at least everybody that has exposure to technology, that has exposure to a television at least, is educated about what sex and intimacy is supposed to look like. You know, and even Hollywood, mainstream Hollywood has also corroborated that perspective because even the way sexually explicit scenes in movies are portrayed often follows the same patterns of how sex or foreplay and sex sequences happen in pornography. And having been exposed to pornography for so many years, I can tell what the average heterosexual pornographic video sex scene is going to look like, you know, the different positions they are going to take, the different things they are going to do, the sequences and all of that. So there is a narrative. And even for me personally, I remember how it influenced my perception about how am I going to keep up to this level of performance when I get married. Now, most times you don't realize that you are benchmarking yourself against an unrealistic data. The average pornographic video, if you're watching a full-length one, would last about 25 to 30 minutes, you know, and you are expecting that in your head, this is what is going to happen in a real-life sexual situation. And you need to understand that the pornographic industry is one of the biggest financiers and biggest conduits for human trafficking, for drug abuse, for sex trafficking, for sexual violence, for rape, and so many things. But I mean, at this point, we are still talking about how it has influenced people's perception about intimacy. So it has given people distorted perspectives of what being together with a spouse is. It has made intimacy about satisfying oneself as against satisfying one another when it comes to sex. It has made it about performance and evaluating yourself over how well you can perform over an extended period of time, both for men and for women. So the general plot around it gives you an unrealistic expectation about what sex is supposed to be like. It gives you an unrealistic expectation about what a woman's body, that's speaking as a guy, is supposed to look like. It gives you an unrealistic expectation about what certain body parts are supposed to look like. It gives you unrealistic expectations about how long you are supposed to last in bed. It gives you unrealistic expectations about what women want in sex. So all of those times, I was thinking that, okay, and those were some of the things I used to justify watching pornography. At the time that I was dealing with the guilt of watching it, was like, this is the only way I can. I'm preparing myself for when I get married, so that I'll be able to satisfy my wife and we'll both enjoy ourselves and all of that. All of that was a lie, because at the end of the day, you realize that an addiction, and anybody who's addicted to pornography can attest to this. If you are being honest, that what the pleasure you derive from masturbation, any form of self-pleasuring and pornography, is entirely different from the way sex goes. And I feel pained, particularly for people who are married and are still dealing with pornography, because you are dealing with a huge issue. It would affect your sex drive. It would affect intimacy with your wife. It would affect your expectations. And it would affect how the priority that you place on reconciling with your spouse whenever you get into disagreement. I feel like one of the ways that God has designed marriage and that dependency and that need for one another is that one of the reasons why, because even for me sometimes, some of the reasons why I feel like, okay, that's not the only reason, is because I also care about you. But sometimes I know that if I don't settle these fights, some things are not going to happen. So that in itself also gives you one more reason to want to make sure that there is peace with your spouse. Now, if you remove that, and that's because you believe, and I believe, that the only means of sexual satisfaction for me is through my spouse. But if you have an alternative to that, there is no necessity in terms of reconciling. So, I mean, if you like, be angry for 5 weeks.
For a lot of people, it's a coping mechanism for stress.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and there are also other challenges we need to explore, in that the nature of life and work right now makes it much more of a tendency for a lot more young people to have struggles with pornography and masturbation. Number one, in this age, the age at which people get married is increasingly becoming higher. So you find people getting married more likely in their 30s than in their 20s. Now, if you go way back in time, medieval times, Bible times, all those times, where some of the instructions to be fruitful and multiply, where there were instructions about if you feel like you cannot keep yourself, get married. The cycle of life was such that the Hebrews used to do, the Jews still celebrate it till now. There's something they call bar mitzvah that they celebrate for male children, I think when they turn 16. So that's a coming of age celebration. What that thing used to signify was that you have now become a man. In fact, then you would actually get married at that point in time. So let's just say, for the sake of this argument, that boys used to get married at 16 back in the day. Wow. Girls used to get married at maybe 12 or 13 back in the day. And even biologically, you will see that, even they will tell you that as you grow old as a woman, the number of eggs and all of that starts to decline. Now, society has reconfigured the model of work such that your youth is deployed into gaining knowledge at 16. Trust me, most people have not even started university or college education. So it pushes the timeline within which you can execute intimacy in the right confines. It pushes it further. Now you finish uni, you start looking for a job. And if it's now bad enough that you're in a country like Nigeria where there are no job opportunities, and so it pushes that timeline further forward. Now, pastors will have a struggle in telling a 35-year-old man who is not married yet to abstain from sex. Now, practically, that is a huge conundrum, because by design, that was not the timeline that was originally set. So you are living in another time zone. So there are several factors influencing how we describe intimacy at the moment.
So I think what you said is so profound, and I just want to speak on how it also impacts marriages. Just to add to what you said, I think that a lot of people do not even know the person or the people they are married to. You know, you would hear maybe a spouse say, "Oh, you know what? My husband is so busy. He doesn't like intimacy," but you don't know that this person is having a struggle with pornography. You know, they ease off with pornography and then they bring home, you know, their spent self to the house, and you just assume that, oh, they are busy, you know, with work, and that's why they don't have time for intimacy. Or you say, oh, my husband is closed off. You know, when he travels, you don't know that your husband is dealing with stuff. And women deal with this too, right? And I think that it's so important that we realize that people are dealing with things that they are willing to talk about, and that the perpetrators or people who struggle with it, they realize, and they need to admit that they are not giving their best selves to their partners as well, because until that realization is come to, you will continue to cheat your spouse from your full self. And the way God designed marriage is that two people bring their full self into the mix, you know, to have that beauty of union and intimacy. And I think that is so profound. Another thing I want to mention is, while in speaking about pornography, I'm sure we're talking about or maybe people would assume we're talking about the hardcore pornography. There's also something called soft porn. You know, today people may not watch the videos, right? Or the movies, the full-length movies, or the clips and all of that. But there are soft porn in novels today, right? Where, I mean, and even as far back as when I was in high school, I would see ladies that I knew that were not so serious with their schoolwork. All of a sudden, during break, they wouldn't go for break. What are they doing? They're reading novels. At the time, I didn't even know what it was about. I'm like, okay, this is unusual for this person. And it was later I clicked that, okay, this is an erotic book that this person, you know, was reading. Even in movies today, soft porn. I mean, I remember an encounter I had, you know, that I told you about just some weeks ago. And I'm like, I almost entered a compromised situation. And for me, it's such a big deal. It's not...
But that wasn't soft porn now. But it was just the innuendos.
And that's the way it works. It's chipping at something. And if we don't admit how powerful... And we need to be honest to say that if something attracts us or something invites us to click, it is speaking to something, and we need to address it. So there's a popular movie, I won't mention the name, but it was about a president and a lady who were in a compromise. I think, what was that role again? A funny way.
I think she was a lawyer.
A lawyer, where they romanticized adultery. They made the actual wife, the character of the actual wife, so terrible that we, the viewer, started to
rooting for
adultery. And I think looking back now, I saw the movie like when I was in uni, and I'm like, how did they get towards this bad? And I remember I was seeing shorts about it on YouTube, and it was harmless, just clips here and there. And then I saw the first time they encountered each other, where he told the person managing the campaign to fire her. And then I had a, you know, face-to-face, and it was like, oh, I'm not firing you again. And it was like an electric moment.
Sexual tension was intense.
I played it 5 times because I was trying to understand the cinematic game they played with us. And I'm like, it was the music, the way this what do they call it, soundtrack, the way they toned down the voice of the surrounding people around. And I'm like, media is so powerful. I know the thing about YouTube Shorts, they keep recommending the next one. And then the next one they recommended was the first sexual encounter between those two people. And I was about to click, and I'm like, oh my God. Of course, it wasn't, they didn't show like full-on activity, but very suggestive and explicit. And I remember we're having a conversation that me opening it, I mean, I'm an adult. I want to believe by every standard, I can control myself. I don't expect it to do any real harm. But the seed has been planted. And I think for us as believers, it's not about, at this stage, it's not about good or bad. It's about the little foxes that spoil the vine. It's about the ideas. Why did I have to hold myself back I'm serious. I was curious. I wanted to, because I didn't remember that saying. I wanted to click, and I'm asking myself, why do I want to click on it? Why do I want to view this?
Yeah.
This doesn't support any value that I stand for.
Yeah.
So why am I viewing it? It may just seem like it's cinematic, it's fiction, but I think it speaks to the deeper issues, right? So it's not, even if a person may feel like I'm not involved in full-blown pornography, but in the soft porn, in the little...
Let me point of correction. That one is not, from an expert, that is not even soft porn. So
I agree.
just,
from an expert point of view. But I'm just saying, like I'm saying, it's not in the full blown, because at the end of the day, pornography is never an end in itself. Just like in your story, it was building up to something, which is masturbation. And masturbation now used into something else. It wrecks the mind. It's birth addiction. It's birth a situation where people are screaming internally and crying to be free, but they can't, because something else is like an autopilot. So it's never just about porn. And sometimes people don't just get into full-blown hardcore porn. It's from the little suggestions, and the algorithm will help you. So if I had clicked that, I expect the algorithm to also suggest, more scenes of something similar. So at the end of the day, we need to hold ourselves accountable. This is not just for people who are struggling with full-blown porn, but if you find yourself, and we are human, we have blood running through our veins. So sometimes we would see those kind of things, and you are curious to want to check, to want to click on it. At the end of the day, we can do anything, but not everything is helpful for us. And we need to think of the fact that at the end of the day, what sin wants to birth is death, really, as the Bible says it. So it's not just about you clicking or about that harmless sin, but what the enemy wants to birth, within us. So my next question would be, how does a person who is dealing with pornography deal with that addiction?
That's the crux of all this. I think in dealing with an addiction, first of all, you don't have to wait till you're addicted before you start to deal with it. I feel like these things are better dealt with early enough. So if you've not been exposed to porn, you actually don't know what God has done for you. Try not to get exposed to it. If you've not been exposed to masturbation, try not to get exposed to it. If you've not been having sex with somebody else and you're not married to, don't start doing it. So these things are better curtailed beforehand. Now, let's say you found yourself in the deep end already, and now you're struggling with it. I think for me, as with so many other changes I made in my life, it came as a result of me realizing that I am harming myself with this act. Now, like I said, there were several cycles and several seasons in my life where I couldn't even place where my stance on pornography and masturbation was, even as a Christian. And the truth of the matter is that we live in an age where you can find justification for anything that you are doing if you look long enough for it. Today, there is data backing up why men need to masturbate more, because it prevents prostate cancer. You can find people talking about that. There is also data to tell you about why masturbation is harmful to you. So you can find data to corroborate or justify anything that you are looking for. And I told God that I knew that I needed help with fixing this problem. In fact, I remember one time I was going to go and meet my pastor that I think I need to confess to somebody, I had to talk to somebody. As I almost got, I think a number of people were waiting. I was already waiting in line. When it was my turn like this, I just said, I just want to come and greet you, sir. And I left. My mouth was so, I could not, even me when I started thinking about what I wanted to say. So most of the time, the reason why you are afraid to confront the problem is that you are placing your reputation over getting better. You are placing your reputation and whatever it is that you hold dear to your heart, you are placing that as a higher priority than fixing yourself for the right reason. Why am I fixing myself? I'm fixing myself because I want to please God sincerely. I'm fixing myself because I need to be a better man for my marriage. So around this period, I realized that, I needed to take my work with God seriously. And it was a gradual process. It did not end in one day. So anybody telling you that you just... Now, okay, another thing I should mention is that there's also the school of thought that, I understand the perspective, but I don't agree with it totally. So there's a school of thought that, if you are dealing with pornography and masturbation, don't do anything about it. Just keep on listening to the word of God, and it is going to, fix that, and you'll be fine. I understand the perspective, But I feel like there needs to be an acknowledgement and an admittance of the fact that this thing is wrong. It is a struggle that I am having, and I need help to fix it. You know, Emisi is also corroborating what you are saying. I need help to fix it. I may not be able to do this on my own. And accountability helps a lot. If you can find somebody trusted, maybe it may not be somebody close to you because you don't want them to have, and it's even harder if you are accountable to someone close to you, because there's vested interest. They may not even be able to check in with you. So it's better it's somebody that you consider to be an authority figure, and somebody who you feel will not be judgmental about you, because like I said, it's a process. It is not a one-day journey. There will be a lot of relapses. And why I don't really buy into the ideology was that, for me, I mean, it was helpful to my mind to make me know that, okay, God does not see me the wrong way, which was good. But it didn't help me in the urgency and priority of fixing the problem at that point in time. What it did was that it made me able to continue with it without feeling bad about it. So while the goal is not for me to be guilty, I didn't feel any necessity to fix the problem. So I could manage both my addiction and my service to God with I could manage a world of contradictions effectively. It got so bad. There were times that I could be listening to sermon and be watching porn at the same time. And initially, I used to feel bad about it. It got to a point where I didn't feel any sense of guilt. Now, that is not the objective. So if I'm telling you, keep on listening to it, if nothing is going to happen, you need to have the right perspective. So you need to understand that this thing is wrong. It is building the wrong fabrics in my mind. So I needed to find reasons why this was not healthy or good for me. Number one, I was so addicted to pornography and masturbation. It was affecting. I was getting all the food that we eat, everything. You know, when you are doing something perpetually for days out of it drains you. Nothing relevant to do with your time at that point in time. It meant, okay, I needed to get something doing. You know, immediately after school, I needed to get my act together. I needed to get my life together. You know, so number one, get yourself busy. Let the time, if there's a particular cluster of time that you find that, okay, this is the time I carve out to engage or indulge in this act, fill it up with something else. Try to keep yourself around people. It is unlikely that you would be watching porn or masturbating around in the midst of other people, except all of you are complicit in it together. But in a public place, you most likely would not. So don't keep yourself isolated in your room. Don't stay in. Come out, be with people. You know, but all of these are just measures you put in place to reduce. And some of the game changers for me was realizing what pornography was actually doing to my mind and me as a person. Number one, it was teaching me to objectify women. Number two, pornography was not teaching me fidelity. This was a very big one for me. If you watch pornography here, tell me if you are faithful to one porn star. Just tell me the honest truth. It is impossible. I can bet it 100%. The very first thing that you are learning for pornography is infidelity. You will never be satisfied with looking at one person over and over and again. Even if you say that, okay, this is my favorite person that I like to watch. Over time, at some point, you will say, I exhaust the person's videos. Your curiosity will drive, because it is really dopamine that, you know, is at play here. And once it is looking for the next, it is similar to drug addiction. Because once that level of getting high is not enough to satisfy you, you are looking for the next one. Okay? So, as much as possible, especially if it's a combination of pornography and masturbation, I would recommend that, these are the things that are within your control. And of course, there's also a spiritual part to it. Pray about it, get accountable, look for help, fill yourself with God's word. So, don't neglect that part. If you can try, first of all, let's even find out if you're addicted. So see if you can go maybe 1 week without watching porn. Even at least let's prove to yourself that, okay, maybe this is just a habit, it's not an addiction. If you're not able to do that successfully, you know the nature of the problem that you have. And one thing that helped me was gradually isolating the feelers that were coming into my eye gates. So there were times that I would go weeks, sometimes months, without indulging in pornography or masturbation. And it seemed like there was a need to aggrandize myself, to feel like, you know, I have it all together and stuff like that. And when a relapse happens, it just makes me feel like, this is a lost cause, you know. And it will not be like all the time that I missed, I will try to make up for it, you know, within that window. Or sometimes just psychologically telling myself, okay, this is the last time, you know, let me just get on it as much as possible, and then all of those things did not work. But what I found that worked, and I'm sure that it was also God helping me on this journey, was isolating all the triggers that were. I remember, like I said on the episode about entertainment, the first thing was I had to go cold turkey on movies that had anything sexual, even innuendos, because those ones are very, very powerful. Because if you have filled your eyes with the real deal, when you are watching those movies where sex is insinuated, you will fill in the gap with what you already have in your mind. So Hollywood is also complicit in this. Do you get? So they cannot just answer. Everything is complementing the other. So you just fill it up with what you already have in your head. And I realized that once I started and social media, there were some pages I had to stop following. If anybody that was revealing cleavage, it was not helping me. And no matter who you are, no matter how inspiring, no matter what it was, I just unfollowed everybody. Started looking for ways to clean my, that explore page. I think it's called. And that's another test you can do. Go on your explore page. Whatever is filled there talks about what you are feeling, the things that the algorithm believe you'll be interested in, and that already paints a picture about what other things you are searching for on that social media platform or other places. And I realized that when I quit watching those movies, when I quit watching pornography, and I had only masturbation to deal with, it seemed practical for a while. But at some point, gradually, your memory starts to, there isn't, because
New
it
material.
is exactly, you need something to get you, because now you have created a shortcut to sexual satisfaction. And for you to maintain that level of momentum, now your body is reclining back to the natural default state. The time it will take you to satisfy yourself is now becoming extended, and your mind is not used to that. Trust me, you would want to go and watch something because it is no longer seeming like the same way. And if you can break through this particular stage of the cycle, you realize, especially for somebody who was addicted to it, like I said, at some point, I did not even need purpose, I did not need reason, I did not need trigger. It was just a coping mechanism. So once you start to isolate these things, don't wait for the big wins. People are always in a hurry to go and share testimony and say, I've been 5 years clean, I've been so and so. This is 2020, what's it, 2025? I'm not talking about this now. This is a journey that I've been on since 2019. And so the goal is not for you to have to talk about it. It is for you to win, overcome this struggle, and live a better life because of it. So it's not for you to be going around and talking about it. That is not the goal. It's for you to win over it. So realize the damage that it is causing to you. And, I think the biggest game changer will be finding somebody that you can trust, who would not condemn you, but would actually help you in the process of overcoming this addiction. So those are some tips. And another helpful thing was I also listened to resources that reinforced the values I wanted to establish. There were podcasts I had to listen to. There were YouTube channels I had to subscribe to every single day, helping me overcome the pornographic addiction. I wrote confessions regarding it. So and I thank God that since 2019 up until now, it's been a journey of progress. Even though the triggers are definitely there. We'll talk about that when we speak about. Okay, I think have you already asked that question about marriage? Yeah. So I'll speak about that after, but that's how you can handle it.
Well, thank you first of all for the vulnerability and for sharing from your heart. I think all I'll add to that is, and I think for me, just speaking from my experience as a productivity coach, the concept of withdrawal, like symptoms as we know it, when dealing with any addiction, not just pornography, is the fact that on that healing journey, that withdrawal symptom exists. And sometimes people mistake that to mean that they are not making progress.
Yeah.
If any addiction, you don't see people having withdrawal symptoms for not going to the gym because it's hard. But once it brings you pleasure and you are trying to stop it, there will always be that withdrawal symptom because your brain is trying to push you to get a hit, of that pleasure, right? So it means that, we hear from different people's story and even from what you shared that even at the point where you made attempt to stop, there was that withdrawal, right? And even when there was that concrete and, actual plan and determination to stop. It wasn't like a one-day thing.
Yeah.
There was that withdrawal, right? Because your body will try to push for you to get it. And I think this is just an encouragement for people who are on that journey, that just because there is a withdrawal doesn't mean that you are failing. Remember, it's an addiction. There's a reason it's called an addiction, because you did it long enough and mental grooves has been made, like neurons,
exactly.
have been firing long enough that it wants to fire again. Right. And because we need to understand, as humans, we think it's just our conscious mind that exists, but it's the subconscious, right? There are hormones, there are neurons, right? And sometimes it seems like the decisions we make are always conscious, but no, some are hardwired, some, we just need a trigger and then the subsequent action just cascade.
Yeah.
So I think we need to, yes, while we put those systems in place and all of that, but just acknowledging this part, I think it can help us extend grace to ourselves to realize that, you know what, I'm on that journey. I'm not upped off that train just because, I had this withdrawal. And same thing goes with a person trying to deal with gluttony. They're trying to get their weight down. Remember, you got your weight up. It wasn't a one-time thing. Do you get? And then when you are trying to, normally you eat for like, you stuff your face in food like 5 times a day and you're trying to cut it down to 2, your body is going to scream and beg you for more food, right? But if you succumb to that day 1, day 2, it doesn't mean you are failing. You just need to keep at it, and then you are draining power literally from those neurons that have been firing for so long. So I just felt the need to add that. My last question would be, what would be your advice for a married person dealing with pornography? How can they broach this topic? How can they bring it up to their partner? And maybe another flip side is, if as a married person, you know that your partner is dealing with pornography, how do you address it?
Yeah, that's a very sensitive and relevant question. Most of the times in marriage, spouses get to find out about, or maybe wives get to find out about their husband's porn addiction, not by the husband disclosing it, but by them catching them in the act. That is the most popular way in which porn addiction or porn indulgence, whichever the case may be, is found out by a spouse. And that in itself already sets a bad precedent regarding approaching the conversation. It's always best if it is something brought up, proactively by the person indulging in it. But then that's either ways the spouse gets to find out. It doesn't make it a comforting discovery. It's very tough and difficult, and which is why I feel it is extremely important and I'll speak to men directly at this point, for us to get our act together. Remember that your porn addiction, your addiction to masturbation or self-pleasuring of any form, is not only damaging you, it's also damaging your marriage and your intimacy with your spouse. The effects that it will have long term are not beneficial. If you have an alternative to sexual satisfaction, you are not doing one of the most important things that are relevant in marriage. The first thing and I will say this before going into what to do in that situation. I remember that one of the things I also had to deal with was the justification I had for continuing my indulgence in porn. Now, many people, we live in a generation where there is the romanticizing of, psychological issues and trauma. So people often tend to trace the root cause of problems. And then instead of treating that root cause, it may not even be the root cause of that problem. They'll just, psychologists will sit down with you, ask you what happened, what was your upbringing, were you abused? So once they just find something like this, they just glorify that as the cause and justification of your addiction. And you now have something to validate and say, I'm addicted to porn, I was abused as a child. You are not helping yourself that way. Or somebody broke my heart, I was in a relationship, my babe cheated on me. Now you are 10 years later, you are married now, you are addicted to porn. It's your babe of 10 years ago that cheated on you. So if you look for a justification, you are making yourself feel helpless. You are making it seem like the situation is something you cannot overcome, you cannot get out of. You are not helping yourself by doing that. So in a situation where a spouse finds out, or okay, let me speak first about the person who is indulging in pornography. You have to ask yourself, is my pride worth more than the healthiness of this marriage? Sexual satisfaction is something that should not be compromised. Most men who are not actively engaging in sex with their spouses is because they have an alternative. So that in itself is a red flag. If for one reason or another you find that, I'm not saying that, of course, that's not an absolute, it's a red flag, does not mean that that is the case. So if you find that your husband is just always spending time alone, in very, very funny instance, you are going to bed every single time, you go, let me stay awake. And you know that this is not the pattern of this person's work. Watch out for those windows. I'm about to give away some people's secrets. Wow. It is one of the reasons why some men spend extended time in the bathroom, because that is the only way. Now, again, don't take this as gospel, because men spend time, even myself, I still spend long time in the bathroom.
And I judge you.
Yes, the bathroom continues to be the safest space,
man cave.
It's the man cave and thinking sports. But I mean, I'm just saying that once you notice all these isolation patterns, you can start to ask questions about the isolation. Not you don't necessarily have to say that are you watching porn? No, you just ask that. I find out that you are always spending long time in the, even you said, you ask me that what am I always doing? So somebody who is secure in why he's spending extended times when their wife is sleeping, you being awake, spending extended time in isolation alone by yourself, any small thing, you have already gone to the bed, everybody's in the house, only you're in the bed. What are you doing? So if you cannot give a justified reason as to what you are spending that time doing, it raises a lot of red flags. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's always better for you to realize that this thing is not helping me. It's not helping my marriage. And I need to swallow my pride. And it is best if your wife is helping you on the journey. Trust me, it will be worse. It was not my experience, but I know. I mean, like I said, I've educated myself on this for a long time. It is worse if your wife finds out by catching you than if you come out clean by yourself to say it. It is always worse in that, because now you are not prepared to handle the matter. It was unexpected. There are a lot more things to deal with in that instance, apart from the trust issues, apart from the insecurity, apart from the neglect, apart from the shame. The fact that she had to catch you, it was not like you came and told her you had a problem.
So that means you don't mind going on with that.
You don't want her to find out that way. So it's best to actually own up to it. So, and I would say to the spouse that be empathic, or is it empathetic? Whatever the case is, you get what I'm trying to say. So show some empathy to your spouse, because trust me, this is a viral problem. I will say it again. This is a viral problem. And you don't want to make it seem like this man is useless. Because like I said, it can happen to the best of us. Even till now, I cannot confidently say that I am immune to my triggers, which is why, even though I wasn't dealing with pornography at the time, I had to tell you my history, my story, my triggers. If you start catching me in certain positions, or you see me doing something, just know that you should start asking me some questions. These are accountability checks that you put around yourself. I should also say this, that something even happened recently, which I told you about. Okay, not recently, like a couple of months ago. I don't know if you remember. So I was just scrolling through the streets of Twitter, and I saw some people having a conversation about a certain word. I knew that word in a different context. And I said,
context, in fact.
You are going into details, please. I don't want to. Some people will know what I'm talking about, so I don't exactly. So I knew what that word meant in a different context. Then I searched for it, and to my honest surprise, it led me to a page I did not know existed on Twitter. I mean, it was porn straight up, and when you're scrolling through something in shock, but your mind is not clicking that you're actually scrolling. I was like, am I really seeing what I'm seeing? And after that, of course, I left the page and just went back to my regular scrolling and all of that. But then for 2 days straight, my mind was telling me, you need to tell your wife about this encounter. I was like, but I did not do anything. I did not watch anything. My mind was just telling me, but boy, you know that you have a tendency of going back there. So I had to start having conversations with myself that, is it likely that you go back there? I say, no, not exactly now. We have been on this journey. Say, See, you need to let us fortify this garrison. Let us fortify this defense. Just go and tell your wife. And I think a couple of days after, I told you that, Bebo, please, full disclosure. I think this was even how I came about the conversation. I just said I should tell you to hold myself accountable. I came across so and stuff like that. And this is what a healthy marriage relationship should look like when you and your spouse are open to each other. I know couples that have brought the person that was not watching porn. The day that one confessed that they are watching it, they use that one as introduction of the other person into the exactly. So they now started, that is unhealthy. That is not helpful because see, look at the things that are validated in pornography. You see, look at the genre of porn that people watch. You see, there is a step parents, sex, incest, multiple sexual partners. Cheating. So even in the themes of the stories that they are telling, they are not even selling to you the right values or the right ideals. We just let you know that everything about that industry is messed up. So as the spouse who finds out that their husband or wife is addicted to pornography or watching pornography, you need help. So maybe both of you may need to seek a third party's counseling going to the journey, because it's very hurtful to find out that kind of information by yourself. And the husband, you cannot rush. I'm using the husband because I'm a man, so I can only relate to the man's perspective. You cannot rush your spouse to just accept that it's part of my journey. You forgive me, no. That's not how it works. Okay. They have to take their time to come to grasp of this secret you have been hiding for years.
And now it's
you that has known for a while that, but I still love you. It's not about love. It's the same way men that cheat tell their wives that they still love them. So it's not about that. Another question I need people to ask themselves, think about it. If you're walking on the streets and you come face to face with one of the porn actors that you binge watch online, how are you going to feel? It is infidelity, except you are not being honest with yourself. Somebody that you have watched time and time again, that you have sexualized, and these people are actually human beings. People often forget. So the fact that maybe oceans and electronic cables are separating you over thousands of miles does not mean that they don't exist in wherever location it is. They are human beings. So if you should walk outside and the person you meet them on the streets and you are shaking them, you will be analyzing everything that you have seen over and again in front of you. So it's not helpful to continue indulging in it. And that may actually be the hack you need to overcome your addiction to porn. It is better done as a team. So if you eventually have your wife on board, it increases your chances of succeeding in overcoming it.
Well, thank you so much. That was so rich. I think what I will just add to that is that if for people who are not married yet, I think the goal for you, and this is something that those who are even married can do, the goal for you is to create a bond or create a relationship where the both of you can talk about anything. Anything. And this is something you start to do even before you get married. I remember even within our first year of marriage, we definitely asked ourselves about our sexual history, right? What are the sexual encounters you've had in the past, sexual struggles, even asking ourselves, what are like your sexual fantasies, even the ones you aspire to
implement or execute
in the future. What are like your sexual no-nos, like the ones that you are not willing to explore for anything in the world. And because that level of vulnerability was always there, I think it was easy for us to now begin to get into like the deeper things. That's the goal, really, that the person you are choosing to do life with, you can be bare about everything and anything. Would there be things that we will struggle to share, at some point? You will share it, but you may first kind of brace yourself because it exposes you in a new way. Maybe it's something you've never been comfortable sharing, but the goal is that you eventually get to share. And that should be something every single person should aim for. Anybody that hopes to get married, or anybody that is married, if you feel like in your marriage there is that block, it exists, or there are some things even in your past you've been unable to share. I know in an African setting, as a lady, they will tell you, or your parents will tell you that it's not everything you tell a man, and all of that. But I think I had to tell myself, what kind of marriage do I want to build? Do I want to build marriage according to culture or according to kingdom? If I'm doing it according to kingdom, I'm willing to bear everything and share everything about myself, because what I'm building is supposed to last for decades, as long as, we're both alive. And I think for me, that's the goal. And having that principle already set you up for success, even in sexual matters such as this. So
I also wanted to add one more thing. So it seemed like I spoke more to married people than to the singles. One more counsel I would give to people who are single is that it's best you fix this before you get married. Trust me. I'm thankful for God for guiding me in that part. I can't imagine having to deal with that struggle, after getting married, and having to now, be discussing fixing it with you. It gives you a good head start, and then it also makes sex in your marriage much more enjoyable and pleasurable. Because trust me, marriage comes with different seasons, and you need everything pointing in one direction where intimacy and your sexual satisfaction is concerned. So, and even though and also, please get married as soon as you can. See, at the end of the day, all this problem is natural. It's a natural problem. You don't have to wait till you have 50 billion. You don't have to wait till everything is perfect. Once you are of age, you have some level of maturity. You are earning a decent income. It doesn't have to be heaven and earth, but something decent to start a family with. You found the right person. Just talk to your family, talk to your spiritual leaders, and just tie the knot and enjoy yourself. You don't delay gratification. If you wait forever, that's why you keep on dealing with all these things. So I mean, as soon as you can, just do the right things and enjoy sex in the right context. Yes,
such a beautiful one.
I thought I was going to be a bit more nervous about this one, but I breezed through.
Well done.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And thank you for being a part of this episode.
Thank you. And I'm already looking forward to the next episode.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you. Thank you for staying tuned to the very end of this, and make sure to catch up on all our previous episodes as well. So till the next time,
tell them to subscribe, like this particular episode,
follow,
share it,
turn on post notifications.
Exactly.
Nothing I missed.
I think that's about it.
Alrighty. Thank you so much. Cheers. To
Bye.
Bye.
Someone had to say it. Someone had to say it. Voices rise, we can do